Part two of I don't know how many of these NoClip. Let's get into Final Fantasy XIV's history with NoClip a little bit more.
ファイナルファンタジー14のその最初のバージョンの、自分が見た時の一番大きな問題点、最終的にそれが問題だったと考えているものっていうのは、その最初のコンセプトとしてそのプランナーがスクリプトを書くことによってゲームを作っていこうで、利点としては、プランナーが考えて自分たちで実装するんで高速な開発ができる。要はそうじゃないと基本的にはプランナーさんはものを考えて開発者にエンジニアに相談してどう実装するかを決めて、でゲームデザインをする人はそのどういうパラメータをいじりたいかとかを相談しながらエンジニアと話をしてものを作っていかなきゃいけないんですけれども、そこの部分に関してスクリプトを導入すると自分で考えて自分で実現することができるようになるっていう発想で、ゲーム実装の大半がスクリプトで組まれてたんですね。でそのスクリプト UI の問題もそうなんですけれども、ゲームも UI も基本的にはスクリプトで書かれていて、でスクリプトを動かすエンジン側がかなり負荷が高いというか CPU をたくさん使わないと動かない状態になっているんで、ちょっとした何かをするだけでも、ゲーム内で少し何かをするだけでも非常に CPU リソースを使うことになっていて、すぐにサーバーが回るサイクルが遅くなっていくっていうこと。
I think there's something really glamorous about the artistic style. When you talk about the history of Apple, it's very easy for Ivy to be one of the people that people latch onto as far as like these historical moments in what we see and what we interface with, as opposed to somebody who changed the game logistically, which is more where Tim Cook came in. I think that when you talk about gaming, one of the things that was so impressive that the games that have stuck around did was that they worked. I think it's really easy to take that for granted. That when we walked into Shadowbringers for the first time this last expansion with all these people, that it worked. That even right now, as of this filming, when there are server queues that the devs are apologizing for because there's so many people trying to get into the game, that the servers aren't crashing. And that's an easy thing. I think a lot of times when we talk about what makes a game unique, we focus on these artistic moments, these emotional moments. We talk about things like developer passion. We talk about the beauty of a certain moment, either in an artistic style or in its meaning. There's some fundamentals in just buying, downloading, and playing a game. It's one of the complaints that Final Fantasy XIV has had of late as people come over from World of Warcraft, is that when I want somebody to play World of Warcraft for the first time, if we're at a state in World of Warcraft where I'm inviting a friend in who's never done it before, I tell them to go download World of Warcraft, and then it just happens. And they just download the launcher, and then it just boots up, and then they're done. And if they want to buy the game, they just buy the game. And there's moments there that are a chance for your immersion to be broken, right? Imagine you're in the critically acclaimed free trial for the first time right now, and you decide to hop into the game, and you can't figure out how to log into the Lodestone or Mog Station because you haven't done that before, and you're wondering, well, how do I buy it? Do I buy it from a third party? And that's something that's very hard to kind of recognize. But what happens there is you give a person a chance to unplug. You give a person a chance to focus on frustrations like, how do I use my credit card? Do I have to call customer support? And that's something that every moment that you let somebody do that, every moment that you let somebody be frustrated, especially when they haven't given you payment for services, is a chance to say, you know what? I haven't paid for anything. I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to bail. And it doesn't mean every single player has that, or I don't think this game would be where it is. But I will say, like, Final Fantasy as a online franchise has had a history with some players having a substantially worse time trying to get into the game than others. And it's something that, like, even years later after this was filmed, I think they could still probably get better at. For every player that didn't have an issue, they're like, what are you talking about? It was fine for me. But having an issue trying to get into this game or return to this game, or if you lost your authenticator and getting that removed, you're not alone.
とが問題として発生していました。で、結果としてそのサーバーでできることはあとゲームとしてサーバーで実現できるところは少ないですし、何かしようとすると負荷が上がっちゃうんで、じゃあそれを回避するためにどうしようとかっていうことで、結果的にそのゲーム内容としてリッチなものが実現できなくなっているってことが起きてましたね。で UI もスクリプトで組まれていたので、なんかちょっと処理するだけでもすごい時間がかかるっていうような問題が発生していました。
Like I mentioned before, again, localization being in a position where we get to see all the parts come together first. We were some of the first to realize that, Houston, we have a problem, that type of situation. I mean, you had the battle team, they're like, yes, we have this great battle system, with stamina and these things that you can do. And then you had the story team, like, yes, we have this story. Oh, hey, we have these guild leads and all of these parts. And everyone was really, really proud of their parts. Look at this grass, it's so beautiful. Look at this barrel, it's the most beautiful barrel ever to be, represented in graphical form.
It's got as many polygons as a character.
Yes, and all of those parts, all of these teams, again, very, very proud of their work. I mean, the team was, put together with some of the best minds in Square Enix. You had people that were, leads that could probably even, lead their own projects, were all come together. And
this is a reminder that there's something special going on with Final Fantasy XIV now that is not just people being passionate for their job. They were passionate during 1.0. This is a reminder that there's something here that's probably very boring if we could drill down to it, but is unique. There's something about the way these devs work together. It's not just Yoshi P. I would love to give credit to the one person, but I think if you take Yoshi P and you put him in charge of any game, I don't think you necessarily get here. There's something about the bringing together of these people that has resulted in something truly special. And I mean, gosh, if somebody could put their finger on exactly what it was and could bottle it, you would have, it'd be worth billions of dollars. It would be worth billions of dollars. Because I do think that having devs care is important, but they cared about 1.0. That did not guarantee that it worked out well.
It became a lot of just tiny little groups making something that was really great, but once we put it together, it was kind of a mess. And no one really knew that, except for localization and probably QA as well, and we're like, okay, we need to do something, but by then it was one of those, it's kind of too late to do anything. But for us, we'd be looking at the text, and some of it, it wouldn't make sense, or it would just be very bland, and thinking, if there's any way to make this game better, what can we do? It's like, well, I can take this text and maybe add some more stuff into it, add some more flavor to it, and maybe that will distract people from the fact that the battle is not that fun.
At a fundamental level, the piecemeal design of the game was causing problems. Graphics were inconsistent. While many elements of the world were copy and pasted ad nauseum, some environmental objects had as many polygons and shaders as a character model. The battle system was just confusing. The game didn't have elements fundamental to most modern MMOs, things like jumping, auto-attack, and the ability to interact with the map using a mouse. It had a system that nerfed hardcore players to make sure they didn't level up too fast. The UI was confusing, crafting was incredibly complex and took forever, and simply there just wasn't enough content. The closed beta wasn't going well.
Which, it would be hard to make enough content if you were busy making every single system a unique set of decisions instead of ever saying, you know what, let's go out there. I think it's really easy from a distance to look into a space and see dysfunctionalness and say, I would just do it better. And look into a space and say, these people are all having success because success is guaranteed. These people are all failing because they're just not trying hard enough. And especially when you see a pattern, especially when you see, okay, there's 10 games that are all doing it the same way. It might be that one person came up with it and the other 9 are being lazy. It also might be that they each individually have researched and tried this out, and that there's some truth to why that reason works. That maybe there's a reason UIs work like that. Maybe there's a reason that games have those features. As we see New World come online, one of the things that as a beta doesn't have me that excited is that so much of it is things that I've already seen in games before, so it's not anything new to explore. But as somebody hoping for the game to succeed, I think there's a lot of value in saying, okay, they didn't reinvent the wheel at every single stage. And that's something that when Yoshi P came in, one of the elements of a good leader there was that he did bring in a lot of context and say, we need to be aware of what's going on in the space. We don't have to carbon copy everybody in it, but we do need to ask, why are people having success? Why are they making the choices they're making? Are there reasons that we should avoid the choices they've made, or that we should chase the reasons they've made, independent of necessarily what we would have chosen in a vacuum? Because we're not in a vacuum. And so I think, the question in chat here is like, would Final Fantasy XIV have had success, or could it have success without Yoshi P? Well, as a single person among billions of people, probably. Probably there's another person out there that could do what he does. But I think you're still talking about an incredibly rare person. I think you're still talking about an incredibly rare set of talents, and for that person to feel equally invested in Final Fantasy specifically as a franchise, and then also ideally have the ability to, be in the right place, which means living in Japan at the right time, speaking Japanese. These are all things, and he identifies as a global developer, but there are a lot of factors that got him to working for Square Enix and being available to be tapped for leadership at that time, that would be very hard to see it play out differently. And so is there a version of Yoshi P that could be a global minded developer to head the next chapter of a different MMO, or the first chapter of a new MMO? Yes, absolutely. I don't believe he's unique across all of human history in being capable to lead a company to success, but I do believe that it's an incredibly rare thing, and there's a reason that we cherish it. So, could somebody do it? Yes, but not just anybody off the street. It's a gift. It's a gift, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of drive. It takes a lot of consistency, and that means that even on days he doesn't feel like it, even on days he doesn't want to, that something still keeps him fueled, and he's surrounded himself with people that do that same thing. They don't just show up on their good days. They show up consistently day after day to work hard towards a common goal and communicate with each other and communicate with their players. There's a set of values there that it takes a lot of work to even maintain those. And being in the future from this documentary, I can tell you they were able to maintain it for at least 4 years after this was filmed. And it's the sort of thing that could get lost with success. So, even this set of people could lose it as they themselves change. We all change over the course of our lives. And I think there is something special about the moment we're in and the moments we've been in, as far as the community and the dev team and the relationships there, that when you start saying, could we swap out this one component, there is a legitimate fear of what if that's the thing that breaks it.
They needed more time to fix these problems, so the open beta was pushed back to within a month before launch. The team knew there were problems, and they were getting frustrated.
で、今まで話していた仕事っていうのは大体その2010年の1月から、実際にリリースされる 8月ぐらいまでの間にやっていたことで、ゲームが本当に良くないっていうのがこう、みんなに認識されて自覚されていくっていうのは結局ベータが始まって製品版が始まってっていう、8月9月10月ぐらいまでの期間に起きたことなんですね。で、実際にはこうチーム内の意識としてもリリース前、そのベータが始まる前から本当にこれをリリースしていいものかどうかっていう議論はある程度そのチーム全体でオフィシャルであったわけではないですけれども、開発者の中ではやはりその世に出していいクオリティかどうかっていうところは
I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. It's very easy to see how somebody enjoys the good moments, but how do you feel when something bad happens? How do you feel going into a launch and feeling your game's not ready? How do you feel when another aspect of your company is undergoing controversy? How do you feel when people are complaining publicly about something that you've spent years of your life dedicating huge portions of your time and energy towards? I can't imagine that wasn't a heartbreaking moment. I can empathize with moments of my own loss, but never ever be able to put myself in their shoes. That would suck.
と議論がありました。
When 1.0 was getting made, was the mentality that, oh, we're not like, that's like their thing and we have our very own successful thing over here, we're going to just make another one of those?
Right, and that's really what it felt like, is that we're going to continue doing what we did because it succeeded before, why wouldn't it succeed again? And seeing that direction, them taking that direction, and knowing that, having worked on 11, that yes, they were very successful, seeing the success that they had with Final Fantasy XI, seeing these great creators, creating something that was, revolutionary. But then on the other hand, knowing that what they were doing was, yeah, but maybe that worked 6 or 7 years ago, but a lot of things have changed since then. And I think there was even one guy on the localization team that got to that point where he just got so frustrated that he just wrote this scathing mail and sent it out to the whole team before telling anyone else on localization he was going to write it. And then we all get it at the same time, the devs team. We're reading, it's like, wow, this is really terrible. I hope he doesn't, he sent it to the whole team. Because he just got really frustrated because to him, they were being very stubborn. They weren't, they hadn't moved on. Whereas the rest of the world had moved on and adapted, with the release of WoW and what they had done.
That's all hindsight, right? Because had it worked out poorly and they exactly copied 11 and it ended up in that state for a different set of reasons, they would have looked just as dumb. For 6 or 7 years went by and you thought you could just do the same thing over again. So seeing it now, it's all so obvious. Being on that team then and saying, okay, should we follow in the footsteps of something that was years older doing something right, or should we go a new direction? Because when you repeat yourself too long, you get accused of being stale and lazy. But when you try to innovate and you don't do well, you get seen as breaking something that wasn't broken. You get seen as being an idiot for throwing something working in the trash. Why fix it if it isn't broken? And so I think that's a really tough spot in game design. If you innovate and you get it right, it's really easy to cherish that. But as a community of gamers across the industry, we have a tendency of only putting points on the scoreboard for innovation when it's done well, when it works out. We have a tendency of resenting a lack of change when we want change, or resenting change when it's for the worse. It's like, no, I want you to change it, but not change it. Mostly I just want it to be really good. Which, I have literally seen that in chats before, but well, if it were me, I would just make it really good. Oh, okay then. That's highly actionable.
Whereas, the team here was like, no, we're going to stick with what we know, and that's good enough.
Then start feeling more concerning the situation. This is not fixed. You announced the launch date, but it's not fixed. So, but still, some major portion of people are still thinking, believing, no, it's better, still better. Last phase, but still better. So it could be, fixed or changed at the launch timing.
Kind of went from thinking, okay, this project's going to be great, to, there might be some problems. Can we fix them? Can we fix them? Okay, we can't fix them. Is there anything we can do? I don't know. It was a very taxing experience.
The team crossed their fingers and hoped that the game's beta problems were simply that, the same issues that most MMOs have, ones that could be fixed with patches once the game entered live operations. And so Final Fantasy IV...
Yoshi recently, that phrase right there gets thrown around a lot. Yoshi recently, a slideshow presentation from a developer conference he spoke at was posted, and one of the things that they said was one of their kind of core values was that you don't rely on things just being something that can be fixed with a future patch, that you don't necessarily wait. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but effectively You don't just put something in the game and go, and then we'll fix it later. You don't just put things in the game. And I think this is likely why. I think the silver lining to this lesson being learned is that it was learned so harshly for the game that there's almost this internal fear, even by people that weren't working on it at the time, that you can't just fix something later. That saying, if you couldn't do it now, what makes you think that later is going to be any better? And so it says you got to stop and work on problems, even if they suck right now. Which is a tall order. It's something that I think all of us could implement in our lives. And so it's really easy to go look at, World of Warcraft and say, wow, how do they not know that? But there are a ton of us that know that we could lose 5 or 10 pounds and we'll do that tomorrow. That look around and say, yeah, I should probably mow my yard or clean my bathroom, but I'll be better about that tomorrow. I could probably work ahead at work or work on that next thing, but I'll do it tomorrow. That I think it just comes from a simple point of procrastination. I think it comes from, I don't have time, so I'll do it tomorrow. I don't think it's anything more complex than that at a base level. I think wanting to fix things with future patches is, I want to get this out so that people can enjoy it. I want to work on the stuff that I'm wanting to work on, and then I'll deal with the problems tomorrow. I'll deal with the fallout tomorrow. And as somebody that struggles with procrastination, I think there's I really, really understand how MMOs get themselves in that bind. But if you don't have time for 5 minutes of work today, and then you don't have time for an additional 5 minutes of work tomorrow, what makes you think there's going to be this magical day in the future when you can do this 10 hours of backlog that never got done?
14 Online launched on September 30th, 2010. It sold well its first week, and after a month had over 600,000 players swarming into its world. But it didn't take long for the cracks to appear. The problems in the beta were echoed by new players. The game was sluggish, the servers crashed, and Eorzeans quickly ran out of things to do. Quests were limited, and the fatigue system even made grinding for XP next to impossible. Critics ate it alive too.
Let's get right down to it. Unless you've got the patience of Job or some kind of masochist, you shouldn't play Final Fantasy XIV. Its problems are so vast that I could spend hours talking about them. The awful interface, the recycled content, the stringent limits on questing, the useless maps, the stupid market ward, these issues and dozens more constantly have you asking that age-old question, what were they thinking?
So, what was it like seeing public reaction?
Yeah, it was very, very disheartening.
I think it would hurt worse knowing that internally some of the devs already felt this. When somebody criticizes you out of left field, at least for me personally, I can say, okay, I got that wrong. I think the criticisms that hurt the worst are the ones where I already had an insecurity, where I already thought I could do that better. And then somebody goes, you could do that better. It's like, you're right. I think those are I think a mistake outside of your control or a mistake that you didn't see is a learning opportunity. When it's a mistake that you already feel like you wish was different, I think that would hurt really bad.
Because you'd want to look at those and you'd want to say, no, they don't understand, they don't know what's going on here, or but deep down you'd know they were right. And that was what kind of that dagger in your heart, and it's twisting because you want to defend what you worked on. The people that I worked with are the greatest people. I still work with a lot of them. I had worked with them before in FF11. I consider them not only coworkers but friends. But
this is why I get frustrated when people say that WoW devs don't care. That the people in the playtesting group, that the people in on the development team, on the art asset team don't care. It's why I get offended at that, because I have gotten to spend time with some of them, and I feel exactly the same way about the people that I've gotten to spend time with, that they do want this to be, a good game. And simply because it didn't work out that way doesn't mean you get to go back and erase intention. It doesn't mean you get to go back and erase somebody's actual feelings. 1.0, I think, came from a place of how exciting would it be to get to work on the next chain of game around storied franchises such as Final Fantasy, moving into the MMO space, being told, okay, we had success 7 years ago, but we want you to do all new stuff for all new technology. I mean, how awesome would that be? You know, don't even worry about copying them. This is a chance to make it yours. Move the needle forward. Take risks. Get out there in front of the industry. How cool is that? I think there's, you know, even for people who left the office at 5 to go pick up their kids, they're probably still thinking about that game at night. They're probably still waking up and writing something down. My experience with people in that industry is that while they may be at the office a specific number of hours, or they may not, depending on the company, I don't know that it's ever really turned off. I think it's always kind of turning in the back of their mind as they play other games, as they interact with other friends, as they go about their life and they see something in the world and they go, oh my gosh, that makes me think that this could be how that works. Let me get that. I think there's something there that to work in an industry that is known for crunch, is known for having issues at some companies with competitive play, that is known for having groups of employees that are treated unfairly, is known for abrasive relationships with management at some level, either a parent company that's putting in the investment or directly your managers or something like that. I think to work in an industry where we can all think of 1, 2, or 10 bad things about being in the industry, you have to question, then why do people do it? And the reason people do it is because they're passionate about what they do, that they said, I want to make games. That's what I want to do. And simply because it didn't turn out, you know, Mike Kaplan's a comedian that talks about, like, comedy is one of those few art forms where when it's not funny, it's not considered comedy. It's not considered the thing it is. And so the question here with game dev is, if it's not a good game, are they allowed to, in hindsight, have been passionate about the development, have cared, or can we go back in time and take that away from them? Can we say, I played your game that you've been working on for years, and I can tell now that you were lazy and didn't care then? Do we have that right to go strip that away from them as a third party in the future?
You know, and then you see people online, you know, bashing the work they did, and I know how hard they worked. I know how many hours they put in. I know that, like, in the last 3 or 4 months, people were basically living at work, all putting their 100% into this game that was, you know, destined to kind of crash and burn. And then to have people online just say, oh, that sucks, this person is a piece of shit, and their work is terrible. It hurts, but it hurts more because if I was not here and was a user and had played that game, I probably would have said the same thing.
そうですね。当時はね、私CFO やってたんで見てたんですけれども、ローンチのタイミングやっぱ一番大きく違ったのは11の時のいろいろごたごたねと9の14の時のごたごた一番違うっていうのは。11の時はいろいろごたごたあったけど、ゲームに関して言うとさすがに相当程度受け入れファン相当のやっぱり評価されたんですよね。でオペレーション上のねトラブルとかっていろいろ多分あるっていうこれはある程度つきもので、大変だったんですけれども、それはあったんですけど、ゲーム内容に関して言うと非常に評価されたというふうに理解してますけれども、前作の場合の一番やっぱ私はちょっとまずいなこれって思ったのは、やっぱりゲーム自体の評価が非常に厳しいものだったということですね。これはちょっとやっぱり相当大丈夫かなというのを、ローンチした後ね、やっぱりそこはね非常にリアルに感じましたね。それはそうですね、ローンチして、しばらく経って、そんなに長い期間じゃなかったですね。そうしばらくなんでやっぱり相当なこのままで大丈夫なのかという。
I mean, the first few months was just an endless stream of translating apology mails from, you know, producers and directors and you know, finding out, trying to figure out different ways of saying we're sorry, because the more you say it, the less weight it has. But Japan being a company or a country where people apologize a lot. That's part of the culture. But then trying to translate that, it's like, okay, this is the 10th time I've said sorry in this one post, and then from the American myself, it's like, yeah, people are going to look at that as insincere. The more you apologize, the more and then trying to explain that to the team, it's like, no, we have to apologize. It's like, yes, you have to apologize, but and it just became, we weren't talking about the game anymore. We were talking about how to translate apologies, and it seemed like that lasted for a couple months.
Actually, we see a huge drop.
That's a rough spot to be in. At a point where your biggest problem is that you can't communicate with your community that you care, is that you can't convey a message that you really do feel, and that you're literally you're worried that a message is going to be received as you just spend a bunch of time thinking of crafting a message, and the way around that is that you have to spend a bunch of time crafting a message. That I think it's very easy to see how a game experiencing success can have a great time hanging out with their community while they're, printing money and making great memories and having people praise them to the point, that they can do no wrong. These moments, these are the heartbreaking moments. These are the moments that I can't imagine. I mean, emotionally, they're very similar. So emotionally, your best day and your worst day have very similar. A wedding and a funeral have very similar chemical washes over your body, and so they can both be very draining. But this is one that I don't know how you come back from this. I don't know how you don't. I don't know why they didn't give up, because I don't know that anybody would have faulted them for doing so. Because it wasn't like, hey, we're trying to save something that once had success. This has been doomed from the start.
I mean, right after the launch timing, we got good number of the subscribers. Then that fall. I mean, as you can imagine. So I mean, it was failure, and we announced failure. So we see lots of decline.
さっきも話した通り、実際にはその開発内でも今リリースすべきかっていうか、リリースできるクオリティにあるかっていうのはベータ直前とかベータが始まってもそうなんですけど、常に疑問はあったので、リリースして実際にただそれまで。
So this is both true and false. There were feelings that it shouldn't have been released, but keep in mind that one of the group of people that most commonly gets associated with not caring about the game are the people that make the choice to release it anyway. But remember that this guy's job was not to make sure that the lights in the room he's in stay on, that the couch that he's sitting in doesn't have to be repossessed, that the lease in the space that he's in, or if they own that building, is paid. Keep in mind that somebody has to make those choices. And when there's lots of success and there's, and everybody's happy, it all works out fine. But when you're having to make a tough choice, when you're having to make a choice on, okay, I've got 6 different directions we can go, and they all have something good and bad. The leadership is the one that has to eat the bad of whatever direction they choose. And hindsight will tell you that, several of those paths went off a cliff and one of those paths worked out. But that's all hindsight. At the time, you're looking down, these dark, foggy roads, and all you can see is that they all cost money. That many times they do involve layoffs or deleting something that somebody did before, or undoing things, or taking a risk with company resources that could damage other projects. It's very easy to see in hindsight what good leadership looks like. What is hard to see how you pick now is how do you pick somebody who is an oracle and can continually pick the right path through something other than luck. And typically the way we do that is we select people who've either done it before, or we select somebody who's on the team and was good at previous jobs, and we hope that they'll be good at this one too. And they might be, and they also might not be, and time is what's going to tell the difference.
までにチーム内にあった空気はやはり出したら意外と受け入れられる可能性があるんじゃないかっていう漠然とした出せばどうにかなるのかも その自分たちが思っているほど悪くないのかもっていうその何の根拠もないと希望的なものがあったんですよね。で出た結果結局そんな魔法は起きなくて、やはりその自分たちが感じている通りにまだ世に出すには早いというか、世に出せるクオリティに達していない商品を出してしまったっていう気持ちはみんなにあったんで、実際にその改善しなきゃっていうか根本的に対応しなきゃいけないっていうところはチーム内に割とすぐ広がったと思ってます。なので特にすごいそんなことはないっていう意見がすごく強くあって、誰かを説得しなきゃいけないみたいなことは特になかったですね。
I think that's a really hard spot to be in. I think that the desire to realize that there's a fundamental problem is something that would be very hard to absorb for anybody. I don't know that there's a part of the world you can grow up in, that there's a culture that prepares you for being told. Because I think the problem there is you have to then start to wonder, is it you? Could the team fix the problem if you got out of the way? And not in a cowardly, I just want to run, even though that feeling might be there, but literally like, is the best decision to cut you? Is the best decision to remove you from the team? At a much smaller degree, imagine that you're in a raid progression group and you guys are wiping to the same mechanic over and over. Do you have to start to wonder at some point, if you're making mistakes, would they be better off without you? And so if you're the one that's not responding to the mechanic, if they replaced you, would they immediately get a clear? And then even if they do, what does that feel like? Should you ever even try it again? I think that it's a lot bigger than like we wanted it to make it bigger. We wanted to make it better, so we did. Because the problem is, what if they didn't? What if they went to make it better and they didn't? What if they went to make it better and they just kept dragging Final Fantasy's name through the mud? Is the best point at some point not to say, okay, you know, how do we turn this around with a third MMO? Because you're putting money at risk that damages all of Square Enix. And so at what point are you making a bad problem into something a lot worse? You know, you should not follow up a bad decision as a justification to make a series of more bad decisions. And so obviously now we know things, but it is hard to see how they took this level of risk.